welcome Quinn Armstrong.
Hi.
And we are here. I'm very excited to meet you. I've watched your wonderful film, Survival Skills, that has been selected by Raindance Film Festival here in the UK, and is a big favourite of the programmers here. So first of all, congratulations, welcome, and it's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you.
Yeah, no worries, thank you.
Cool. So Survival Skills, it's got a huge amount of contemporary relevance given the deaths and the police brutality that has been happening in the States. But this script, you wrote the script before, you know, the recent events that happened. It was written in 2016, am I right?
2016, yeah, the first draft.
So tell me, what was the inspiration?
So I have worked in domestic violence shelters on and off, worked and volunteered for years. And at one point I wrote a very sort of painfully earnest drama that is essentially the same story as Survival Skills. It's a police officer gets involved in this TV case, all that stuff. And it was very well researched, and it was very earnest, and it was very, very boring. And so I sort of put it in the shelf or put it in the drawer. And then around sometime in 2016, I became aware of, a friend of mine emailed me, I think, of these sort of wacky police training videos from the 80s. And I watched a few of them and I thought, you know what would be a really stupid idea? Would be to combine a very earnest drama about domestic violence that actually deals with it and a parody of these wacky police training videos. And for some reason, no one stopped me. I blame everyone else for this. I should have been stopped from doing what I've done. But yeah, so it was sort of I'm a big believer in like the collision of ideas. You know, you have an idea and it just sort of sits there for a while because it needs something else. And then you have another idea that's way over here. And I think there's tension and potential in sort of like getting these two together, getting these two very disparate ideas to collide. So that's sort of the background for the initial idea.
Because sort of ideologically, you know, you've got a computer-generated policeman who's trying, you know, he's sort of his moral compass is pretty spot on, but still can't get it right.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the early pitches were about how we seem to be building a society in which kindness and the things that we say we value are it's not that they're discouraged, it's just that they have no place, because, you know, we are building a more efficient society, efficient theoretically, you know. And this is an old story. You know, Charlie Chaplin did this in modern times. It's nothing new to talk about. But I think particularly within the context of the police are a regressive institution in the United States that has not changed. They're still functioning in the 1950s, essentially. In many ways, that's when, I mean, not to get into the whole history of the police, but that's when many of the kind of seeds for what we're seeing now in the States were planted. And you can see it in the way that I was genuinely kind of shocked in the way that the cops in the United States responded to the unrest after the murder of George Floyd, because I was expecting them to do what major cultural institutions generally do and stuff like this, which is say, oh my God, this is awful what happened, we're gonna change, and then just not change. That's what these places, these institutions usually do. But they just doubled down on being awful over and over again. I live in Seattle, and I was in the, which was big news over here, I don't know if it was big news over there, there was the occupied zone, which was sort of a police-free zone in Seattle. And I saw many of the protests, and I saw a cop shoot a 24-year-old woman in the chest with a stun grenade. Her heart stopped several times, and our medics helped her, not theirs, not their folk. Our medics saved her life. So I was kind of shaken by that. That really changed how I feel about the police. And you know, police are always really nice to me. I'm not the aggrieved party here. I haven't had a bad interaction with a cop. So, you know, there's a certain level of naivete to that. But yeah, it's been interesting. I have wandered far afield of the initial question you asked.
No, it's really interesting. I find it very interesting looking at films and seeing, you know, how the contemporary relevance changes over the years. And, you know, I think you've hit on some really interesting questions about, you know, the age of the police, and, you know, them sort of not moving with the times. And you use some really interesting technical techniques to make that point. It's a really, really interesting film. And it was adapted from a short that you wrote, and there's a bit of a background story to that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, it's more accurate, I suppose, to say the short was adapted from the feature, because the feature was written first, and I put together, you know, a little bit of money to make the short, and I pitched it to people as though this was a short that was actually going to, you know, go places and do things, and that was a lie. The purpose of the short was to get Stacy Keach on board. Because it's a lot easier to, you know, when we are but poor film students and stuff like that. We're not, you know, we didn't have any big production houses or anybody big behind us. And so going after somebody like Keach, it's a lot easier to be like, hey, come out for like 4 hours to shoot your bit in this short. And then, you know, he comes out, we treat him very well, we're, you know, very friendly, and more importantly, we get to show him the finished product. And we used that to sort of get him involved and get him signed on for the feature, which I regret nothing.
Well, it's a very good strategic move, and I've got to say, having the seminal sort of Mike Hammer eponymous actor in your film could not do any harm whatsoever.
Well, I actually didn't know. I had never seen Mike Hammer. I had never seen, like, I knew who Stacey Keach was, obviously, but I knew him from a play that he did in at the Lincoln Center in New York called Other Desert Cities, where he plays it's a great play. He plays a sort of Reagan-esque figure, an old actor who is a very sort of authority-driven guy. And seeing that, you know, Reagan is a big presence in survival skills. Like, his picture is everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and his attitude is everywhere. And that was the big thing. I wanted someone who had that sort of like authoritarian. I wanted a guy who sort of felt like a would-be fascist authoritarian, and unfortunately Donald Trump was not available, so, you know, we did what we could.
He might be next year, fingers crossed.
Well, you know what, we can go to the jail and we can shoot his bits in prison.
Wonderful. And what was it like to work with him?
Oh, it was amazing. So on the day that we had Keach, a lot of his stuff is sort of behind a desk. He's playing the narrator, so he's just sort of presenting the movie. So we set up 2 cameras, one in medium shot and one in a close-up. We had a little teleprompter in front of the lens, so he could look directly in the lens and say his many, 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 many lines. And he sat behind the desk, and he came out and nailed the first take on every single one. And then I would give him like an adjustment in case we needed it. And so we did 2 takes of everything, and we left 3 hours early that day. It was everybody was very happy with that. I kept trying to think of, like, I wanted to be a good director and like, no, I should not, like, I should use all this time, but I just couldn't even think of anything to do with him. He was just
A
nailing it.
producer will always say a good director is one that can stick to the schedule as well as delivering a great movie. Okay, brilliant. And tell me about your lead actor. How did that come about? How did you find him?
Vayu O'Donnell, who responded to an open casting call, so originally, I have a background in stage acting. That's sort of how I came up with all this stuff. And originally I was going to play Jim. And so we did this sort of open casting call, and I was like kind of low key rooting against everyone who came in to read for Jim. And, you know, people came in and nobody was really sort of getting it. And then Vayu came in and I was like, oh shit. Because he was so good, and he brought something in that I hadn't seen in the character. Like, my version of Jim was like very sort of harsh, not harsh, but just sort of like robotic, and you know, there's a sort of intellectual cast to it. And what Vayu brought in, which makes the movie work, is this kind of childlike sense of discovery to the world, and this sort of like optimism and all that stuff. Felt much less robotic, and it allows the audience to connect with Jim. And so, you know, as soon as he walked out of the audition room, I was talking to the producers. I was like, yeah, we have to cast him. Like, it would be massively selfish not to.
So you didn't get to play the part. Were you not tempted to write yourself into a different part?
I actually don't. I'm not crazy about film acting. I've discovered, you know, since then, I've done a few things. I've been in projects with friends and a TV show and a couple things like that. And it's just very like, it's very stop and start, you know? It's like eating a delicious cake with the tiniest fork in the world. So you can't get a nice bite. Whereas, you know, theater, you have, you know, 2 hours and you're just executing the path that has been set out for you. And it feels sort of athletic in that way. And I love that. And I miss doing theater. There is no theater right now. But film acting is, plus I'm really glad I didn't, because man, I had my hands full. Right? Directing the movie is plenty. I don't need more work than that.
Well, you got a great result, so congratulations. And I'd love to talk to you more about the funding, and I'm guessing you didn't go for the whole development funding, and how did you what was the budget and how did you get it together?
So the budget, as you know, on paper was around $100,000. Nothing.
Wow.
The in-kind budget, you know, I called in a lot of favors. I called it, you know, everything that I had. And we had the support of Movie Maker magazine does this production services thing where they hook you up with discounted post services, and that was great, and really helped. But essentially, what we were just kind of madly improvising the budget and the whole thing. We shot in 2 cities, in LA and Seattle. We shot in over a dozen locations with over 20 actors, about half of whom were SAG, on $100,000, which is not what people do. If you have a $100,000 budget, you're generally shooting in one location with like 5 actors, and it's probably a horror movie. Like that's generally probably
in 10 days maximum.
Yeah, we shot 22 days, I think.
That's
yeah, and the credit for that goes to our producers, Colin West and Mike Downing, who every day I was expecting everything to fall apart. Like, we could not afford to lose a single day. And somehow we didn't. Somehow we made our days, you know. There were some compromises that had to be made, of course, but I'm totally in awe of those guys.
How did you meet them? Because that's a major challenge for creators such as yourself, is to find good producers that will you know, do that for you.
Well, this was Colin. Colin is a dear friend and is an incredible filmmaker in his own right, and is primarily a writer and director. He's not primarily a producer. I met him at USC. I went to USC's grad filmmaking program for a year and a half, and I learned exactly as much as I wanted to learn, and then I left. And the main thing that I got out of like the biggest thing I got out of USC was meeting Colin. And you know, for a program that is as expensive as that one is, you know, you better get something out of it. And Mike was also a USC guy. We met him there. Our crew was about half USC, half AFI. And, you know, young, sort of hungry folks who are not working for a ton of money, but are, you know, are working on their first feature generally. And we just got lucky. We just got great people.
Great. Brilliant. And then, so tell me more about the technical side of things, because you've got these wonderful fuzzy sort of VHS effects that really transport you into the 80s.
Yeah. So the short version that we did had a digital filter to make it look like a VHS, and it was a really good one. It was, you know, a company that does this professionally, and you know, anytime you see like a VHS effect, you know, somebody's watching a TV and their VHS in a movie or something like that, they're probably using a filter like that. And that's fine for a short form thing. But for survival skills is a bait and switch, essentially, where you are promised a parody of police training videos that's going to be fun and silly and poke fun at stuff. And then, you know, once I have you, I start stabbing. And so we needed people to accept that this was real, that this, you know, we needed people to buy into the VHS and not be like, oh, well, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. That's not accurate really quickly, because we're moving on. We're doing other stuff real fast. So what we did is we shot the movie on a RE Alexa Mini, I think, or an Amira, I can't remember which one, which is a really high-end digital camera. Panavision very generously supplied to us for free, which was amazing. And then we edited it on Avid, you know, did all our digital effects, did all that stuff. And then once it was cut, once we had all the visual elements together, I took it, put it all on VHS. So wrote the entire movie to, oh, they're actually right here. These are the tapes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, these are, I mean, and there were many more tapes than this, but these are the final super VHS tapes. So I put it on these, and like this is LP1, that's long play 1, so this is the entire movie. And some of these are broken into sections and all that sort of thing. So I put it on these, and I got 40 VCRs, and I put the tape in the VCR, took the top off, and then I would play the movie and use magnets, knives, and fire to create static and tape wrinkles and warping and all that stuff. So all the effects are analog and organic. There's no digital static in this. And that ended up being phenomenal because I couldn't fully control it. So things happened that I wasn't predicting, and we just kind of had to, you know, work around it. Then, you know, you sort of take it off the VHS, re-digitize it, and then do your color correct, and then do your sound. But the post-process on this was about a year and a half. It was insanely long, insanely difficult. Our poor editor, who was also essentially our post supervisor, was, you know, trying to keep track of everything, and I was running around like a crazy mad scientist breaking VCRs. I had a stack of 40 broken VCRs in my apartment, and never again, never again. But I'm really glad we did it.
Yeah, well, as I said, it really did just transport you into the 80s. It was really well done. So we also talked a little bit about the directorial inspirations just earlier. Just there's a sort of slight Lynchian effect to it, and who are your directorial inspirations when it comes to this film?
So I come from theater, and many of my inspirations are from theatrical productions and things like that. I've done research in how like the Greeks staged their plays at the Athenian Dionysia and stuff like that. And that all that sort of presentational stuff is really big for me.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you can tell watching the movie, it's very theatrical. It's
Yeah,
very,
now you say that, I'm thinking, yeah, Oedipus Rex and
yeah. And stuff like, like Brecht, who had this whole idea of alienation in theater. Like his whole thing was he didn't want you, when you're sitting in the theater, he didn't want you to forget that you're watching a play, because his plays were political and to a certain extent didactic. And so he would use these alienation effects to, like actors holding cards for scene settings instead of a set, stuff like that, to create that effect. And to a certain extent, that's some of what the VHS effect and some stuff like that does. As far as film goes, it's funny, like Lynch and people like Charlie Kaufman and the people that, these are the people that tend to get brought up in terms of survival skills, which is massively flattering to me and massively insulting to Charlie Kaufman and David Lynch. I adore their work, how could you not? But they are not the people that I tend to think about in terms of working methods. I tend to think about people who sometimes I'm not even that crazy about their movies. Like I'm going to get burnt for this. John Cassavetes, his movies don't really work for me. However, his working style and some particular moments he captures is fascinating. And I think about Cassavetes all the time because, he's a brilliant artist who knew exactly what he was doing. It just doesn't happen to work for me. So I think I'm not interested in imitating necessarily the people that I like. I think that's important. Like my favorite movies tend to be like rom-coms. And I'm not interested in making rom-coms. I'm not interested in imitating, Some Like It Hot or The Apartment or these movies that I love. I'm much more interested in grabbing somebody from over here, grabbing these wacky police training videos, and then grabbing someone from over here, grabbing this domestic violence drama and bringing them together and seeing what sort of weird alchemy happens. Again, I've wandered far afield of your actual question.
No, that's a perfect answer. I think that's fascinating, and that's sort of to say the alchemy and the technique. I think that sums up pretty well, like your style of working and what makes your work really interesting, because you wouldn't put those two things together, and it's really original, and you come out with a really unique project.
Well, and it is potentially insulting. And it's potentially in poor taste. And there are a few people who have had a problem with what we did with survival skills. Interestingly, all men.
Right.
The people who have found this to be in poor taste, which that's a totally legitimate take on this. I think you gotta court that. Like when people talk about like being controversial or taking risks or stuff like that, like dead naming a trans person is not edgy. It's not provocative. You're just being a dick. However, presenting a narrative in a risky way, which is not punching down. This is not a movie that is making fun of domestic violence victims.
No.
When it's making fun of the police. That's punching up. That's the kind of alchemy that I think is important, because you could make a rom-com with a slasher villain. You could do that, and it'd probably be fine. But it doesn't have that third type of alchemy, which is the danger of putting these two together, the danger of being misunderstood, the danger of being in poor taste. And those are really important to me, because I don't have anything else. I don't have that's what I offer as an artist. I can't make, earnest dramas about being Irish, I guess. I can't make slick action movies. This is what I got. And so that's coming at you in 2022. You'll get another one.
On that theme, what's next? What else have you got?
So, there's a few things in the offing. There's some smaller projects, some bigger projects, some stuff that we're pitching in studios and stuff. The main thing that we're looking to shoot early next year, in spring next year, is very similar to Survival Skills. It's part of a sort of trilogy of projects that all deal with the idea of created personas and unreal people. Um, it's a spiritual sequel to Survival Skills, set in the world of teen slasher movies, and it has my favorite title of anything, second favorite title of anything I've ever written, called Dead Teenagers.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I like that. I like that one a lot. It feels
It
very.
knows its audience.
What was that?
It knows its audience.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I like about it is that it makes a promise. It makes, we all know a horror movie called Dead Teenagers. Okay, we all know basically where we're going. And I love, there is no feeling better than not keeping a promise that you make to an audience. Because it's, people are like, oh, Dead Teenagers, this is going to be a teen slasher movie. No, it's not. It'll look like it, but that's not what we're doing today.
I like it. So is this going to be an ongoing theme throughout your film career? Is this going to be your thing? We always know that a Quinn Armstrong movie is going to do this.
Because as soon as you know that, it's like the M. Night Shyamalan thing. As soon as you know there's a twist, the thing for me is like these are cold movies. These are cerebral movies. Survival Skills and probably Dead Teenagers to a certain extent. The trick over time is going to be, because anybody can do high concept and anybody can do a clever idea. The trick is finding the tension between what is earnest and what does need to be said. I don't want to make a movie just because it's clever. I want to communicate. That's what this is all for. And finding the tension between what is heartfelt and what is sort of arch and slanted and presentational. And that's the project. And that's something that, gets into like my own personal psychology and upbringing and all that stuff. But that seems to me to be of value in the world. There's a good reason to create a movie like that, because people have a hard time feeling things now. The world like bombards us with information, bombards us with movies and genre and cliches and all this stuff constantly. And if you can get at somebody in a roundabout way, you can kind of break through their defenses and give them something new. And you sort of break in and plant your little seed of an idea, and then you get out. Yeah, that's kind of the project. Hopefully, we'll see how far I get.
Well, I think I have a good feeling that that this is the start of a fantastic oeuvre of work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do next.
I self-finance my smaller projects, so you can't stop me. At this point, this is happening. I enjoy doing it. People can not watch, sure, but they're happening one way or the other.
Brilliant. Well, keep creating, and as I said, I can't wait. And I just want to say on behalf of Raindance, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work. On behalf of myself, it was an absolute pleasure spending this time with you. And yeah, good luck. I really can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. We're really thrilled. Raindance is our international, our European premiere. Technically, Fantasia was international. We're really thrilled. You guys have been. It's clear you guys are working really hard to put together a great virtual festival. I know how hard it is. And also to anybody who is watching this now or in the future, if you have any questions for me or for any of the team, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I run those accounts because we're not fancy. So come at me if you have any questions.
Brilliant.